Right. So here we are again.
Hello.
Um, so yeah, the reason I wanted to get you on the show for this one is because we seem to always have honest, kind of open, non-judgmental conversations. No
We
one's
do.
canceling anyone. No one's
Yeah,
shutting anyone down. Um,
exactly.
so that yeah, this topic is another kind of sensitive one. Like we've done one with race
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So I'll just set up the episode. So on the evening of 3rd of March 2021, 33-year-old marketing executive Sarah Everard disappeared in South London. And this sparked a lot of conversations, raising awareness, viral posts regarding sexism, sexual assault, and rape culture. So the way I thought we'd discuss this topic is there was two posts on social media that I saw went viral following the disappearance of Sarah Everard about what men can do to better themselves.
Hmm.
I will read out some of the points that are on it. I won't put them up on the screen just for copyright reasons. But before we get to the specific points, I wanted to make a general point about the whole topic and just see what you think about some of these topics. So
Okay.
the main one is I'm getting a bit of deja vu with the Black Lives Matter topic. Everyone's just kind of went quiet.
Yeah.
It was weird. So like I noticed it was less than a week, like 2 days after maybe this massive viral post and stuff like that. Everyone on my social media posts were like posting stuff about sexual assault and stuff like that, their experiences, which makes sense. It's a massive topic that needs to be discussed, and it's a massive issue that we should
Mhm.
be discussing. But I noticed it was maybe like 3 or 4 days, just silence. No one's talking about it anymore. And it was almost the same as with the Black Lives Matter point. And I'm just curious. Do you think this is a social media trend, or is this activism,
Can it
or
be
both? I
both?
suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can it be both? I mean, I think obviously people really care about these issues to talk about them. I mean, I think people do care about them. But at the same time, I think you're right in the sense that, these days we tend to have this big furore about a topic, and then a few days or a few weeks later it goes quiet. And I think I've said this to you before. I think we need to maybe, if we really do want to get into activism and we really are passionate about these topics, social media is a great tool to get your opinion out there or to raise awareness. But and obviously due to COVID, we can't really go out. So what could we maybe do after COVID to make sure that life is still given to these subjects, because they have such an impact when there's millions of people talking about them. But imagine what we could achieve if millions of people put that work and that effort into organizations, into charities, into maybe more public speaking. But yeah, I do agree. I think we do that in society now, don't we? Where it's kind of this big hoo-ha about something and then it kind of dies down. This was really important, though. I think this was a little bit different. But yeah, I do get what you're saying.
Yeah. I also think like going on about activism is that a lot of these issues are people are very accusatory with their activism, where they'll say if someone's being silent or if someone's not doing everything they can to fight, say, like racism or sexism, then they're racist or sexist. And it's almost the same with this topic as well, as if there's anyone who's not posting about this or anyone who's not actively doing something, they're sexist. And I just think that we've got at the moment we've got a lot on our plates, and we shouldn't
Yeah.
be accusing people of not doing everything they can, especially when people like 2 or 3 days after this big problem that they're not going to post anything anymore. It's like if you're going to accuse people of being silent, don't do the same thing 2 or 3 days later.
Mhm. I mean, first of all, rest in peace to obviously Sarah Everard and
Of course.
her family, and condolences to her family. I think that's really important to say. And I do agree with you to the most extent in regards to we do in society now, we accuse people very quickly. And if you're not doing this box ticking exercise of what people expect, because your own expectations are your own perception. So it was the same with the Black Lives Matter thing when people were saying, well, if you're not posting on Facebook, then you're racist. And we know that's not true. We know I'm mixed race, and I know some of my friends were really active on social media and posting, and some of my friends weren't as active. And one friend I spoke to said, without going on too much of a tangent, she said, I would love to post. I just don't feel like I know enough about it. and I don't feel like I have the knowledge to speak on it. So I would rather listen and digest information rather than go and rush to post something that I'm not really actually thinking about and considering, which I thought was actually a really mature and great perspective to give, if that makes sense. Same with this topic. Now, I do think clearly we have a society which is very male dominated. And I do think we do have an issue with some males, but then we can't generalize and say that all males are like that, because we all come from women and men, really, if we're going way back. But at the same time, we obviously do have an issue in society where a lot of murders and rapes are perpetrated by males. So there is an issue in society, but if you're directly talking about the generalization of it, then I agree we need to be very careful when we generalize. And that's an issue I think we have right across the board now with the social media kind of culture.
Yeah.
Hope that makes
kind of, no, it leads nicely into the next kind of topic. So the first post I want to talk about is quite a long one. So the main crux of the post is basically a reply to men who say not all men. So the not all men reply was when people were saying men need to change, men need to, basically stop sexually assaulting women. And some men replied saying, well, it's not all men, which I think this is similar to the all lives matter reply, in that it's a fair point. It makes sense. Of course, all lives matter. But it's not really. I don't know if it's quite necessary in this conversation. Mm-hmm. I would say maybe a good compromise would say, if you're going to talk about this issue, say too many men do this, or this, like a lot of men do that. And I think another fair point is changing the language in which we speak about this. So one example I saw was, we shouldn't be saying this is how many women get raped a year. It should be, this is how many men rape women. I mean, you're putting the focus on the women and making them almost like the perpetrator, when in reality this is a male issue. But I just think, what do you think about the not all men reply?
I mean, I agree with everything you said. It is very, very similar. Well, it really is very similar to the, all lives matter response, and it is quite irrelevant. But I think what's missing in society now is context, and nobody seems to be mindful of the language that they're using. So if you say men and you don't provide context, then that would hint to the other side. So men, that you're saying that all men are like this. I posted something to my story and somebody replied, one of my old editors was basically saying, when I moved to Glasgow, be really careful next to the river, men are, bloody bastards, and I know how they think, kind of thing. And someone took offense to that, and he was like, I'm more concerned about the fact that he's saying all men are like this. And I was like, fair point, but he is also a male, so he knows exactly how some men think. Yep. But it is the context, it's the words that you use. Some men, you could, but I think you're right in terms of, I was just thinking there when you were saying about how, women, it puts emphasis on women rather than men. I think that does maybe stop victims from speaking out, because it's a shame, potentially. The shame in society, we kind of perpetrate, it's like I said, all the emphasis is on the women. Whereas really, if we maybe flip that around and say, this is how many men rape women, it wouldn't be so much of our issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just don't understand why so many men got so upset about this. I get the not all men point, but I just think people got too emotional about it. Like, for me, it's the same with the Black Lives Matter thing. I didn't take offense to Black Lives Matter. I just think, why would I take offense to Black Lives Matter? And it's the same with this issue. Why would I take offense to this? It's just, I know that when they say men, I'm not part of that category if they're talking about men who rape or men who sexually assault. So why would I take offense to that?
Yeah.
It's like, you need to, it's like the context thing. You just look at this with context. You know that when women are saying men do this, they're not saying all men do this.
Mm-hmm. It makes you think maybe these men have a guilty conscience. Maybe it's not to
Yeah.
the extremity of raping somebody. You would hope
Mm.
not, but maybe they do have a guilty conscience. Because I mean, lines can be blurred. It's been something I've been thinking about lately. I mean, I had an instance once where, I was with somebody and it took a long, I had to keep saying no, no, I don't want to,
Mm.
no, I don't want to. And you don't really think much of it at the time. And it was actually before all of this, it was about a year ago. I was reading, I think I was just Googling one day as I do and kind of reading up on things. And they were saying, oh, it's coercion. Like, that's what sexual coercion is. If you have to, well, part of it, if you have to say no 10 times over and then you kind of just give up, where are the lines here? So obviously it's not all men, but I'm sure men, a lot of men maybe have a story where they've made a joke to their friends about maybe sexual assault or rape, or maybe, and again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure there is a lot of men there who probably have advocated for behaviour in their friend groups, which really isn't acceptable. And I've seen it with my own eyes, but again, we have to be careful. I mean, the Sarah Everard case was she was murdered. So that's one extreme to another, if that makes sense. And I think we just
Yeah.
have to be very conscious of what the extremes are and deal with them accordingly.
Mm. I think for men, probably the best thing to do, if you if you're not on that extreme that you've never sexually assaulted someone or raped someone, it's still, I think it's still useful to look back on all your experiences. Have you made a joke that you shouldn't have made? Have you laughed at a joke you shouldn't have laughed at? Or even just look at some of like your sexual encounters. How did that? How did you behave there? Did you behave correctly? Stuff like that. It might obviously it might not lead to the fact that you might have sexually assaulted someone, but your behavior might have been like somewhat inappropriate, or you could still learn lessons from your past, even if you've never sexually assaulted or raped anyone.
And I think this is the thing. I think the person I was with, I highly doubt they saw it like that, and I think this is but maybe it's our education and society that needs to improve. I've seen a lot of people say, well, why don't we teach young boys and young women in our sex education classes on what a healthy relationship looks like, on how to treat each other, on how men should treat women, and be conscious of the things that women really do go through in society. Like I said, I highly doubt the person that I was with thought of it like that, but it wasn't until I come away. I didn't think about it like that in the moment, and it wasn't until I came away and said, "Hang on a minute, like I said no 8 times, and
Yeah.
you kind of just kept on going, and that, and I actually came away, but it didn't register until later." So maybe we need to establish what the actual boundaries are and healthy relationships between men and women, and really get that education in early so that we're not making the same mistakes and we're not leading to, lines being blurred. Because again, people say, well, men should just know better, and that is true. But at the same time, sometimes, like I said, I didn't even know better in that situation until I came away and said, oh, well, hang on a minute. That doesn't actually sit right with me, that I had to say no 8 times. And I just ended up giving in because that's somebody that I was with. So I was like, oh, just give in and, oh, okay, fine, but is that right? No.
Well, you think in that situation, the first no, that should have been enough.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of drop it after the first no. That should be enough of a signal for you to know that you shouldn't be taking this any further.
Yeah, and I think this is, I guess, slightly off topic, slightly still on topic, but I think when you're in relationships as well with somebody, that's another thing that I've seen talked about a lot recently, is when you're in a relationship with somebody, how do you establish your boundaries? How do we also as women better establish our boundaries? And how do men as men better respect those boundaries? It's difficult, and like you said, you're right, once should be enough. But sometimes I think, like I said, I walked away, I didn't even think much about it until later on. I was kind of reading up on all this coercion stuff, and I thought, oh, okay, actually that wasn't okay and that wasn't right.
Yeah. I think one thing I like about the conversations is they have been, well, for the first time that I've seen, focused on men. issue before I found was that people were saying, women, you need to dress a bit, like cover yourself up more, because if you're wearing heels or you're wearing a short skirt, you're asking for it and it's your fault then. I
No.
think that was the majority of the conversations about this was women, you need to walk home in twos or walk home in groups because you need to be safe. And it's like, no, men, stop raping women.
Uh,
That's the
yeah,
the idea here is that's what it should be. It's the people who are doing something wrong we should be talking about.
yeah.
And
I
that's
mean,
not the women in a short skirt.
totally. And I think I'm entitled to wear whatever I want as a woman. And that should not give you the right to, why can't women embrace their sexuality without fear of repercussion? Why do men, like you're saying, no, it's up to the men to control themselves because, again, and this has been an age-old argument, men can walk around with their tops off, they can walk around in bloody Speedos, and nobody bats an eyelid. No woman is really going to be like, oh, or rarely, being careful
Yeah.
about my context. But rarely are women gonna, act on that. Whereas if a woman was walking around, in a short skirt or heels, bad things can happen, and we've all been in that situation. I've talked to a few of my friends where you're walking home maybe from a night out or even just a party or even a dinner, maybe even 10 o'clock at night when it's dark in heels. And sometimes you even take some flat shoes with you to make sure that if anything happened to you, you could run faster, or you'll have a flashing thought where you kind of say, haha, if something happened to me, I wouldn't be able to run very fast in these heels. But why do we have to have that fear in our minds that what we wear would garner unwanted attention? It's not right, and men should be taught. I think the key to this is education from a young age. And also, there's a huge responsibility on parents to make sure that they're teaching their young boys this as well. I mean, why are men allowed to embrace their sexuality and their sex and gender and women aren't? Why is that allowed? I just don't know.
So what would you consider unwanted attention? So I think in this, say
Mm.
if we have this scenario where you've got a girl who would be considered good looking, she's maybe wearing a short skirt, she's on a night out, she would probably get a lot of attention from men anyway. She might have a few men maybe asking to buy her a drink or trying to chat to kind of chat to her and stuff like that. I think in that scenario, there's nothing, I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that unless someone said, can I buy a drink? She said no, and then he insists. Like
Mm-hmm.
in these situations, if the girl says no, you just, like a man should just be, well, that's that then. But do you think, well, I suppose, where's the line there in that scenario?
I mean, if we're talking biologically, humans are designed to be attracted to each other and they're designed to see beauty in each other. And that is natural to some degree. So if I went out in a hot outfit, and I was feeling good about myself and I knew I looked good and I got a bit of attention, it can sometimes be a little ego boost, but you're right. If it was attention in the sense that someone was coming up and grabbing me, or someone kept pestering me and following me around a bar or a restaurant or a club, or somebody just wouldn't take no for an answer, or someone put their hand up my skirt, of course, yeah, no, I would say that's unwanted attention. Or
Right.
someone was making disparaging remarks about what I was wearing and wouldn't leave me alone, that is unwanted attention. A little bit of attention's fine from afar, but I think it all comes down to our boundaries, and everyone's boundaries are different. So what I might find acceptable, my friend might not find acceptable. Like I personally don't really care about being catcalled. I think it's a bit cringe. It's more cringy for them than it is for me. And my like, when builders whistle at you or whatever when you're walking past. To me, that doesn't really bother me. I just kind of ignore it and keep going. Some women really don't like that, and that's fine. Some women find that really uncomfortable. So I also think it is personal boundaries. But I think we can all agree if you were out wearing a short skirt and a man kept pestering you, then that is harassment. If a man touched you unwantedly, that's harassment. So I don't think there's really an argument to be had there.
Yeah.
But it's when we start going into, I think this is kind of what you're getting at, when we start going into the little instances of maybe builders catcalling you. I think it's a very personal thing. I think different people have different boundaries. Some women might, like me, might laugh it off or just ignore it, and I won't think about it again during my day. Some women might even get an ego boost from it, and some women might absolutely hate it and get really uncomfortable. I think we've got to respect each other's differences.
Yeah. And while we're on the subject, I will, for anyone listening or watching, I'm going to link some things that I've seen. Like there's one with iPhones where if you click your off button
Yes.
five
Yeah.
times, it'll do an alarm or send a message to your emergency contacts or to the emergency services to your location. And I think there's another one for Boots Pharmacy. If you go in and you say something specific, and it's the same with bars, you can go up to the bar, ask for someone, and they'll know that that means you're in trouble, basically. So I'll link them. But right, we'll go on to the first post on Instagram.
Yes.
So this one was the reply to men who say not all men are the issue. So the post says, let me clarify exactly which men are part of the problem. And then it says 67 different types of behavior that men do, some men do, and basically says that this is how many men there is an issue with.
Yeah.
But so a general point I want to make about this is it's 67 different types of behavior, not 67 different types of men. You'll probably find that under 10 different types of men will do the majority of this type of behavior. So like a molester is one of them, is probably a man who's going to rape someone as well.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Or if someone catcalls someone, they're going to objectify women as well. So this is all just behavior of specific types of men. It's not 67 different types of men. It's maybe 10, I would say, maybe.
Yeah.
But you've got, so there's ones here that there's not much point going over because we should all be in agreement. Men who murder, fair. Men who rape, that's fair. Also, it does make a good point that men who rape can also be someone who's with his girlfriend, and if she's very drunk and says yes, that could maybe be construed, but we should maybe get some more context on that one. But one I didn't, incels, do you know what that is? I have no idea what that is.
Involuntary celibates are a member of an online subculture who define themselves as unable to find romantic or sexual partners.
Are they part of the problem? Unless they act on it and they get angry at all women for not finding them attractive. I think that's the issue. But
I'm guessing that's what they meant. I'm guessing that's what they meant, because surely if someone can't find a sexual or intimate partner and they're celibate, then is that someone who's celibate by choice? Well, involuntary, sorry, but is that somebody who, I don't know. What are the factors?
Yeah, well, that's a tricky one. Maybe a bit of context is needed in that one. That's another one. That was another point I had in my mind, was all these posts are so vague, and this is such a complex, sensitive topic that you can't just be general or vague. You need to be specific. You need detail, context, and I think just some bullet points, very vague bullet points, isn't going to do the trick. And I think this is when we're talking about if this is a trend or not. I think people like to think they're maybe doing something about this issue by just clicking retweet. And it's just maybe more, what might be better is to share an article, like a detailed article about this topic, or this podcast, you know?
Yeah. Oh, good plug.
Yeah. Didn't plan that one.
I mean, I think as a journalist as well, that's why I'm just very careful about what I put online. And I used to just be that person who would share everything and anything, even up till last year. And I kind of got to the point, people maybe think, well, why isn't she speaking out about that as much now? And I think it's because I like to actually go away and read things before I put them online and make sure that I actually fully comprehend them. A bit like what my friend was saying about the Black Lives Matter thing. I would rather, there's power in listening as well. And I think we've forgotten about that in our modern day culture. Is it's great to talk and get your opinions out there, and everybody wants their perspective heard. But at the same time, there's also a huge power in listening and absorbing information. I think maybe we're all maybe a little bit bad at that sometimes now, because we just want to be right. It's right. I've said this before. It's right fighting. You know, we want to be right and we want to be heard.
I think with social media as well, the very nature of social media is so emotional, and you can get your emotion out very quickly. You can just like type something and click send really quickly without properly thinking about it. So that's like, I'm kind of like you. I will really think about what I'm posting. Or like this, I've been sitting on this kind of idea for since these viral posts went out, and I've just been taking the time to kind of digest everything that everyone's been saying, thinking through what I think, trying to think rationally, trying to think of these issues from a woman's perspective, not from my perspective. And I just think that's what's needed here. And I think when people are just listening, we should maybe applaud them if they're just looking at all these social media posts, reading up on it, but not necessarily saying anything straight away. They're just digesting it all for themselves so that they're more educated in it.
Yeah, and I think you've got to. Like, how are we meant to learn from each other if we don't listen to each other? But I think you're right about this post. I mean, I'm just looking at it here on my phone as well, and it's a lot of points. And to be honest, I think I agree with 99% of them. But yeah, I would say there's a couple. I mean, just the example here, the ones who take pride in their body count conquest. This is what I was talking about earlier when we talk about, I'm sure every man could probably say that when they were younger or in their friend group, they've maybe made a joke or an inappropriate joke, or I don't know, egg their friends on without maybe asking what their friends' motives are or something. I mean, correct, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I've heard it among friend groups myself. I mean, even when I was 17, maybe, I used to go clubbing a lot. And you know, as women, I have to say, we dismiss a lot of these instances. So, and I don't know if other women agree, but I would like to think that they would. Like this, we've probably, when we actually sit and think about it, had a lot more of these inappropriate, unwanted sexual situations than we actually even really comprehend ourselves. And again, it's when you come away and you think about, or when you get a little bit older and you think, hang on a minute. I mean, I've got when I was like, after all this came out, I was like, I've got a plethora of these, and you don't act on it because some of these things also don't always go down as crimes. So what would be the point? You feel like, what would be the point in reporting this? You also don't want to hear what people might say about you. Well, did you egg it on? Did you ask for it? Well, we saw you in the club wearing that short skirt. So then and so you think it's better to stay quiet than to, oh, my voice is well funny. It's better to stay quiet than to cause this whole furore. You might know some people who know the person who's done that to you, and you're all in the same friend group, so you don't want to rock the boat. There's so many different instances, and I mean, I was 17, I was in a club, and I mean, I went outside for a cigarette with this guy, and you know, he kind of started touching me a little bit inappropriately. So I was like, okay, right, let's go back inside. Yeah, someone, I keep my cool quite a lot, and I try and keep a handle on a situation. And I kind of pushed him off because he just did it without kind of any permission, or I'd maybe kissed him or something, but then it just went a little bit, I didn't want anything else like that. And we were in public as well, we were outside. So they started, getting a little bit inappropriate. So I said, okay, let's go back inside. And then the next day, his whole friend group was saying, oh, you slept with him. And I was thinking, first of all, we were on a public street. So I don't know how that's meant to happen. And two, it's just, I was actually quite disgusted by that because I thought, instead of either just keeping your mouth shut or asking me, you're actually coming up with a rumor. And no matter how much I tried to protest it and say, well, no, we didn't, I kind of pushed them back and went back into the club. But then you ignore it, you just carry on with your night. And I'm sure a lot of women have stories like that where it's a little bit inappropriate or it's wrong, but then you just ignore it and you just get on with life.
Yeah, I think with this male culture of like counting up your sexual conquests, I think that was the quote. I think with that, just thinking on the top of my head now, I think it's a maturity thing as well. I think this is something that 18-year-old guys will do. And probably I was probably part of it as well. at that age, but you grow out of it. You get to a certain age where, and this isn't me condoning it at all. I
No, I
should say
don't
that at the
think you
start.
are, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
most guys should grow out of that. They reach a certain age where they think that doesn't matter and it shouldn't matter and we shouldn't be thinking that way. And I think just some guys don't grow out of it and they just that's their mindset for their whole lives. And I think maybe the answer to that is just stopping that mindset from the get-go, so that it's not just young 18-year-olds who are doing that. It's no one is doing that. Like it shouldn't be. Like we grow out of it, which is a good thing, but maybe we shouldn't have anything to grow out of. That shouldn't be the mindset. That should maybe be taught not to think that way.
Maybe if we didn't gatekeep sex in society, we just made it a normal, neutral thing that we do for pleasure, or we do to procreate.
Well, same thing.
I can't get my words out today. Then maybe, it wouldn't seem like such a trophy or an achievement. Because let's be honest, again, that's what we were all put on this planet for to some degree, was to procreate. And I think if we again had, it goes back to education, and when I look back to my sex ed classes at school, I can't really remember what we were taught. I found out about that through a neighbour when I was like 8 years old, and it was my female neighbours were like, you do know what a vagina is and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, no. They're like, and they explained it all, and my mum was horrified, but my grandma was like, listen, she's 9, like she's going to be a teenager in a couple of years. I was moving up to Scotland. She was like, you don't know what the kids are going to be like up there. I think you should slowly start to discuss this with her, because it's something that she's going to need to know about. But up until then, I really was really naive. I had no idea really what that was. But I was quite young in retrospect. I mean, 8, 9 years old, you would think that's quite young, but maybe we do need to start having these conversations, especially when kids are so exposed to the internet, and we've got a problem with porn being easily accessible, indecent images being easily accessible. And when I mean indecent, I just mean like even girls in bikinis, and young boys are looking at that on Instagram. It's so accessible now for kids, and I think we need to have those conversations. But what I was going to say on your point about men grow out of it, I do agree to some extent, but do they grow out of it, or this is kind of a rhetorical question, do they grow out of it, or is it just more coveted as they get older? Because maybe their friends have matured, but I've also, again, dated, by the way, I've not got a long list of dates. I'm very single, right? It sounds like I've like dated everybody. But I've also dated somebody who was quite incessant with following women online. And when I say incessant, we're talking like 50 girls a week. Girls in bikinis, kind of like jokey, kind of like sexual meme pages and things like that. Was on Tinder all the time. Just, I don't even want to know how many people he was two-timing me and probably other people with. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that he was like, yes, sexual conquest, but somewhere in his mind, he must have kind of had a bit of an addiction towards that lifestyle. I don't even know what you would call it. Some kind of addiction towards women. And he was in his 30s. And there's other men that you see on, and I'm not saying Tinder, everyone on Tinder's like this, but there's other men you see on Tinder. So is it, do they really grow out of it? Or is it just that they don't, kind of shoulder bump each other and say, well done, bro, anymore,
Yeah, I think there's probably different stages to how men grow out of it. I think there's some men who grow out of it completely, and they do view like that past self who was behaving that way. They will look at that and maybe disgust and think that shouldn't have been my behavior. I'm glad it's not my behavior now. There'll be some who pretend that they've grown out of it, but in their head they're still thinking that way. And there'll be some who just haven't grown out of it at all, and they will be boasting to their friends openly. And I think all of it's an issue. And I think with that, the guy that's always on Tinder and the guy that's following all these people online, I think that's an addiction to screens. I think that's an addiction to, like, it's hard to explain, I suppose.
I would beg to differ.
I
I
think
would beg to
it's
differ.
like they get used, and I think it's also the same with like Tinder. Is it's very like it's like this kind of it's almost like a dopamine hit. You see
Yeah,
someone and then you just get
true.
rid of it, and then there's a new one, and then there's a new one, there's a new one. It's the same with online as well. There's a new one, there's a new one. You're almost addicted to the people on the screen rather than people in real life, and that is probably what leads to this mistreatment of people in real life.
But then
That's
it's
just me.
still
That's just me
mistreating.
on the top of my head.
Yeah, true. I think it is a screen. It's some form of addictive personality, but then at the same time, it's also mistreating women.
Of course, yeah.
And this is what we're talking about. It's also mistreating females and women and how you see women as just sexual objects that you can pick up, and maybe this is the problem. Maybe this is why we have such kind of problems with rape and things like that. And I'm not saying that person did that at all. That's not what I'm saying. That's completely separate. But I'm just saying, again, educating men. Like, women aren't just objects that you can pick up and throw away. And again, like I'm saying, that's not related to anything like that. But I'm just saying there's a scale, isn't there? And
Mhm.
I think is that, like I said, looking at just following loads of females and they look at them in bikinis and look at, so sexy, I can do this, I can do that. And that's a problem because I should be able to wear whatever I want. And yeah, okay, sometimes I dress up and I won't mind if I get a few compliments here and there. It's a bit of an ego boost, but I'm not dressing up because I'm like, oh, today I'm going to wear a really short skirt so all the men on the street look at me. I'm simply wearing the outfit because I like the outfit. But obviously, some men don't see it that way.
Yeah, I think maybe a solution. One, I think there's probably needed a lot of different solutions for this, but I think one is probably getting in there early to stop
Yes.
children from accessing pornography because it's
Yes.
so accessible to anyone, and just the undertones of a
Mm-hmm.
lot of pornography say to men that women should be the the inferior one, and some are
Submissive.
just incestuous as well. I think a lot of pornography is normalizing incest in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
I
mean, I
think
don't know.
another
I don't.
thing,
I don't really watch that. Well, I don't. I'm not too sure. So, but I know what you're getting at. I agree. That's what I was saying earlier. We need to get in there young. And when I was told at 8 or 9, kind of about what the birds and the bees, people might go 8 years old. That's so young. Like, what would she be doing at 8 years old? But it's getting in early so that as I got older, I was a lot more aware of, again, it can be trial and error. Your parents, thank God, can't be there to handhold you through every,
yeah,
sexual experience where you're, is it PSE teacher?
yeah, yeah,
PSE teacher is not going to be there. Um,
mm-hmm,
so it is trial and error, and you're going to kiss some frogs along the way, and you're going to meet some really nice, respectful men.
mm-hmm,
So, yeah, I think getting in young, the education would be my solution.
mm-hmm,
But not just on sex, though, it's healthy relationships and it's forming healthy relationships between a male and a female. Because although we've come a long way from having separate entrances for men and women, at the same time, there is still this kind of divide between males and females in society, where, oh, if you have, male friends, then, you're one way. If you have a lot of female friends, then you're the other. Why can't we just see each other as people? And yeah, there are differences. I'm not naive to say there's differences in our genetic makeup, but at the same time, I think if we just taught children and teenagers and adults just to see each other and respect each other for human beings with feelings and thoughts, maybe we could make progress. Sounds very
yeah.
simplistic, but I don't actually know what the answer is.
Well, I think there needs to be lots of different answers. It's not going to be solved with just one.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think. Well, when I think back of like my sex education in high school, I can remember that we put into groups of maybe 4 or 5. One person had to put, I think it was like a condom on a banana. One out of the group, only one got to do that. So the rest of them were just kind of like, right, well,
Actually,
I don't know what I'm
yes,
doing, but I could what I watched it happen.
because I really wanted
Um,
to do it and I didn't get to put the condom on a banana. I was raging.
I think the other thing I can't remember any gay sex education, anything to do with that. Maybe we did. I don't want to like badmouth my school or
I,
anything like that, but
I
I don't
didn't.
remember that anyway.
It was a different time though. I mean, I think I
Yeah, that's
forget
true.
sometimes that I'm now 25 and I was
Yeah,
born in the 90s.
yeah,
And as much as that seems to me 5 minutes ago, it was a
mm,
whole different time. Like even mental health, I'm not going to go off topic too much, but even mental health wasn't discussed
yeah,
a whole lot at school. So we've come a long way. But yeah, you're right. I think it would be great to just normalize sexuality, normalize
yeah,
sex a little bit. Like, why even now, like you feel taboo? Even talking to some of your friends, sometimes you even
yeah,
feel a bit taboo because you don't know, if people are going to find that weird or. And I think, yeah, if we just normalized it a little bit more, we could maybe see it be neutralized by
yeah,
normal. Yeah.
yeah. I also think like a point to be made is there's something not right about men who rape women or who sexually assault women. There's
No.
something there's something wrong there, and I think a solution there is simple is fixing that problem because no male who's confident in himself, who has like a healthy level of self-esteem, who is just healthy in general, is going to rape a woman. So there's something up with the men who think they can rape women. So there's something that it could be society's done, or it could be something their parents have done, or something their friends have done, or their
Yeah.
teachers, or something needs to change in educating boys to stop some boys growing up to thinking they should rape women. There's
Hmm.
something, and that's maybe going back into mental health as well. There's maybe something. There's mentally they must be in ill health if they think it's acceptable to rape women.
But then we've got such a lack of mental health funding. It's a
Yeah.
shame because then if mental health was more normalized, then maybe we could
Mm-hmm.
target these issues. Um, and I'm a big advocate. I mean, again, I always feel like I go off on a tangent. Not to go off on a
No, it's
tangent,
good.
but I'm from, and I hope my mum doesn't mind me saying this if she sees this, but I'm from a, quite abusive household. Not my mum,
Mm-hmm.
my dad, and I've seen negative male mental health pretty much since birth. And
Yeah.
I know what that's like. But again, back then and even now, how many people can say that? Again, it's hard because we can't have if you don't take yourself for help, and sometimes the help only comes when it's too late. Like when men have done something like that, then they'll get all the therapy they need in prison
Mm-hmm.
or on probation or whatever. But again, positive mental health and creating stable environments in a household for children as well. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so passionate about that. And I think that's why, for me, when I do settle down eventually and have a partner, it's very important for me coming from that background to make sure that I do find the best partner that my kids can have. Or the best, parent that my kids can have, because I think that education and the environment that you grow up in is very important to how you're going to develop as you get
Mm-hmm.
older.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't like saying stuff like men who rape women are mentally ill because they think that you're condoning it. It's not to say that it's not wrongful behavior, but it's just more thinking that from a solution focused point of view, that maybe the solution is um, helping more men out of being mentally ill. I mean, you've got a lot of like I think it's more men commit suicide, and also you can
Yeah.
also put into that category. You can put more males are in prison, more males rape women, more males sexually assault women, more males definitely assault men and murder men. So it's not just the solution isn't just to say men are the worst and they need to change. The solution is what the change needs to be, and looking back at what the problem is. And I think the problem is male mental health is one of the biggest issues anyway.
Yeah, you're right. There's obviously a pattern here, I think, to some degree. And I think there's always going to be a root cause. If you manage to kind of break down that barrier of somebody, you're always going to find out, even if they don't even really realize it. Again, it's all about listening to people and kind of seeing how their psychology actually works. So if you actually ask somebody, you'll get to the root cause eventually. And that's what therapists are for, though, isn't it? They probe until they get to the root cause of your psyche. So there is obviously a pattern here. It's just how do we manage it in society? How do we stop men raping women? I think the theme that's coming up, even from what we've talked about today, is education from a young age. And I also think, like we're saying as well, porn has a lot to answer for. I think there needs to be much stronger regulations around that. And I think parents also need to do their duty as well in ensuring that what their children are looking at online and the message that they're giving to their children is the right one, and to make sure that they're educating their kids correctly, and to respect people, and to respect women, because this issue has been talked about for centuries. It's not something new. I've grown up hearing about it, and I think I think it starts at home. Education definitely starts at home, but it's what our authorities can do in the way of schooling, like we've talked about in education. What can we do? All the messages we even see online or in adverts, it's being conscious of that and making sure that filters right through.
Yeah. Going back, like, so we'll look at maybe a few more points, because I think the majority, big tangents there. But we've covered most of the points anyway. But one point there that maybe should get maybe at least a definition is victim blaming. So I'm assuming that that's what we're talking about there. So women in a short skirt gets raped, you blame the women for wearing the short skirt. There's your example. That's probably an example of victim blaming.
Yes.
So the one I wanted to play devil's advocate on, because is the ones who make rape jokes. So on the surface, I'm going to look like the worst person for maybe playing devil's advocate here. But I think some people would argue this is infringing on free speech. Now, I think if a guy makes a really horrible, disgusting joke about rape, it's not funny. We shouldn't allow that, and we call that out. But I think maybe from a comedian's point of view, this is what I kept on thinking when I thought of this, was comedians, I suppose their job is always to go very close to the line. And if you say what you can and can't say, then you're infringing on that. I just think, well, one question maybe is, where do you draw the line on that? So if we can't make rape jokes, then can we also not joke about what's other things that people, like comedians now are joking about 9/11 or joking about the Holocaust? Do we not joke about them as well? So it's where do you draw the line? I think we shouldn't be making people who aren't comedians shouldn't be making rape jokes. And I think people should know the comedian they're maybe going to see. So if you don't want to see a comedian who's going to go really close to the line, don't go see Frankie Boyle, because you're going to be very upset at what he has to say. That's just, and I don't like rape jokes. I think they are horrible. And I suppose that was just the thing that came to my mind when I read that, was some people would say, well, that's infringing on free speech, or comedians wouldn't like that. What do you think?
You were just pondering. Yeah. And I think, again, in society, we kind of jump on people for even just saying, well, I was thinking about. So happy to always listen. I have to disagree slightly. So not even slightly, I kind of disagree. So I get what you're saying about the comedians. I do think you kind of pay to go to an experience where they make you feel uncomfortable and they teeter on the line of inappropriate, but you have to remember you're paying to go and see that experience, so that's a choice. I think what people are meaning when they say the rape jokes is general people in society. So groups of guys at school or at the workplace or even in your friend group making those jokes incessantly, or even not incessantly, but just occasionally. You have to question a little bit, like, what do you find funny about that? You know, I think someone's humor says a lot about their personality. And, you know, we've done a few of these interviews. I am not, huge on the whole cancel culture thing. I'm an advocate that I do think we need free speech, but like you're saying, where do we toe the line? I would toe the line on rape jokes, because if I heard a man or a friend, and I'm actually trying to think of any examples where I spoke, and I can't think of a specific example, but I think I have heard men, and I have actually in a pub, so I do remember an example. I'm not going to repeat what they said, but they made a really crude joke, and all the guys were like, hee hee, you know, like laughing
Yeah.
about it. And I said, ew. I was like, you
Mm,
can't say that. You know, I just kind of turned around, I was like, you can't say that. And
mhm.
because why do you need to make that joke? Why do you find that appropriate? And I'm not saying that all of these guys will go and do the thing that the man joked
Yeah.
about. But again, is it this kind of where you've got five guys, would one do that? And maybe not the other four? Does that make sense? Like you just don't
Yeah.
know why, and this goes back to what we were saying earlier about men egging their friends on. Um, maybe friends need to hold friends more accountable. Even
Yeah.
if,
I think,
you know, by saying, oh, mate, that's disgusting, you can't say that, you know, but even just making them think, oh, shit, okay, no one bought that one, okay, I won't make that again. Maybe that
yeah.
was too far. Like, hold your friends accountable, even in a nice way. You don't have to fall out with them.
Yeah.
But I just don't find, I actually find it quite uncomfortable when people make those jokes. If I was
I
paying to
think,
go to a comedian, that's different.
yeah.
Just,
I think
you
at the very least, this is one of the points that needs a bit of like more context. In
yeah,
that, maybe one way of drawing a line on that one is you shouldn't make jokes about rape victims. Like I can't think of a single thing that could be funny about a rape victim, but I've seen comedians who would make fun of the rapist. So comedians making fun of Harvey Weinstein, for example, that could be classed as a rape joke, but
that's different though, because
it's
that's not,
poking fun at the op. But that's what I mean. It maybe should be a more
yeah,
context in there. Like it's not.
yeah.
It should be don't make jokes about rape victims. I'm sure we all agree on that one at the very least. But
Yeah,
poking fun at the rapists,
the perpetrator. Yeah,
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 that's yeah,
yeah. Because you kind of make a joke about how disgusting he is, or you know,
yeah,
you kind of yeah. So that yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's different. You're right. It needs to be context. But if I think that post is more well, whoever wrote it, if they ever see this, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think they're probably more talking about in general
yeah,
when you have a group of friends making a joke about something really horrible that does happen to people, you know, like it does. And not specifically joking about, oh, Harvey Weinstein's a beast, you know, like something like that, or a pedo, you know, whatever.
yeah,
It's joking about when you hear, like I said, in that pub instance, it was directly joking about something awful that does actually happen to a lot of people.
yeah,
So why do you need to make those jokes? Is it to show off? Is it to
mhm,
get a reaction? Is it for a like why do you need to do that? And my whole point was, like I said, if you've got five friends and all the guys laugh at this joke, yeah, four of them might not do that. And you'd like to think that
mhm.
people you know would never do something like that. But does anybody know, you know, any rapists that have actually went out and done that? Did anyone think before that they would do that? This is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. We
I
can, yeah,
think
yeah,
I think there's some with that example of like the five men. One might take it to think, well, it's okay then. If they're joking about it, then it must be acceptable behavior. I think the thing is with these bullet points is people like me, like you and me, and the majority of people will look at that and understand what is meant by the bullet point. Like I do understand that that's what it's trying to say, but I think there will be some people who are look at it and think, well, that's ridiculous. You can't say that, and they won't know the implied context. A lot of these posts they have implied context, and I think with like topics like this one, you need to put the context in.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the problem, the general problem with the internet, isn't it? Twitter, you get
Yeah,
124 characters or however, 122 characters or whatever it is. You can't really get your whole context into that. I think we also have a responsibility to provide more context. That's why I'm quite thankful that I'm a journalist in this day and age, because
mm-hmm.
I'm literally trained to make sure that I put context in what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Or at least try, even if I post like something on my story, you'll probably see quite often I'll write something underneath in my own words. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, I was just actually looking at some of the other ones. I mean, I would say I agree with 90, like I said, 99% of them. Like the ones who rank girls. I mean, can we, that one I would maybe say is a little bit ambiguous in the sense that, do we not all do that? Like, we all have types and preferences, and we do that as women as well. You know, you used to have your top 10 at your top 5 at school or whatever. I don't think that one, I think maybe a few of them, they've just kind of tried to chuck a few extras in. I mean, women do that as well. And this is what I'm saying about generalizing. There's some things that, yes, are exclusive to men, but then there's also things that, like ranking, you know, we do that, or he's hot or he's not. Yeah, I like, you know, we all do that. So that's one that I would probably not so much agree with, unless, again, the context is different.
Yeah, I think the main problem with these posts is implication. Because they're so general, people can think what it's implying. So when this says stuff like that, when it says don't objectify women, yeah, don't objectify women, but that's maybe another point that could be, that is also general, where women do the same to men, not to the same extent and not to the same numbers, but it does happen. Women will look at a guy and think, like, he's attractive or something like that. Yeah, I think it's just with these posts, there needs to be more context, and they're too vague for this topic, I think, because it's so complex that the implication of it can be misconstrued. Like, one person will read this and think something else compared to what we might think when we look at it.
Oh, right, yeah, and I think it's because now as well we're not very good at paying attention, so we want everything in digestible chunks. So it's easier to do a quick infograph than it is to write a full 800-word article, edit it through, post it, and all of that kind of stuff. And I get it, and then you worry that people won't read the whole article and things like that. But infographics are great, but I definitely think you should always attach a video or an article to most of your infographics, unless it's just a straightforward thing. I think you should always say, oh, link in my bio to an article I wrote, or maybe just spend even 2 minutes and do a little video to put on your IGTV or whatever, just to say, so posted that post and this is what I think in more context. Yeah, I think it's, that side is kind of separate. I think it's more of a problem with the internet, which is a kind of a whole different conversation, because we see it in cancel culture, we see it in pretty much our culture now, right? That's our culture now, to kind of just jump on something. And I got told off once for not posting enough context by my brother, who's in America. He's like, you have a bit of a platform now, people listen to you, you should be providing more context. And then from that day on, like I said, I always make sure that I'll write a little note, even with like a meme or something like that.
Yeah. So I'll quickly move on to the next one, which is shorter, which says at the top, I'm a guy, what can I do? So the first one is what we were just talking about, stop objectifying women. Fair enough, shouldn't be objectifying women. Again, well, I think with the conversation that we're having, some men would maybe come back and say, well, stop objectifying men as well. I would reply to that saying, that's not part of the conversation. That's not what we're talking about. It's a fair point, but it's not. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what men can do.
Yeah.
Women, that's a different conversation to be had.
Yeah. And if you want to start your own cause, go on with your good self and start your own cause, that's fine. But it's irrelevant to the immediate conversation that we're having now. Yeah.
Yeah. The other ones, don't catcall. So I don't know. I think with that one, I agree with it. I think I've like, my partner has had issues with catcalling, and it makes her feel uncomfortable. And I just think, what is the point? I just always think it's always a builder. It's once no, don't want to generalize that. It's not always a builder. But it's usually a not very good looking man. It's usually it usually is. It's a man who's run out of ideas and he's going to honk his horn and he's going to cackle. Like, I don't understand what he's thinking is going to happen. Like, the woman's going to turn around and be like, oh, great! I'm like just looking for that.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. It's probably never worked. So I think people who take offense to that one, like men who say, "Well, we can't catcall women anymore," did it ever work? So just get rid of it.
Yeah, and I think you need to question your maturity levels if you're catcalling women from a balcony or a car or something like that. And, you know, since we've moved to Glasgow, that's happened probably twice as much than what has happened in Glasgow. Like I was saying earlier, it's not that I don't care. I do feel a little bit uncomfortable by it, but I just want them to know that that is not going to affect me. Like, you're not going to make me feel uncomfortable walking down the
Hmm.
street. Even if I do slightly feel like that, I just, like I said, I pay it no mind and I just carry on
Yeah,
walking. Or I'll kind of, kind of go like, because kind of making them feel stupid for doing it,
yeah,
because hopefully, probably not, they'll cringe at themselves so much that they'll stop doing it.
yeah.
Probably not, but
Mhm.
I do feel slightly uncomfortable, but I tend just to I feel more sorry for them that they
Yeah,
actually have to do that than for me, who's just walking to the shop.
yeah. Well, maybe that's what social media could solve if we
Hmm.
make a meme go viral to show how horrible it is, and hopefully it'll reach these men, and that might make a difference.
Yeah, it's just
Um,
embarrassing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's usually that's the most annoying thing is it's usually old men who are
Hmm.
probably married, and it's like,
Yeah, that's
come
true.
on.
I've lost all faith in the world. Honestly, I have.
um,
I'm done.
another well, here's one that I get the implication, but it says leave women alone in public spaces. I get the implication. If you want to put context on that, don't follow women home at night.
A lot of
Don't
people, yeah,
speak to a
yeah.
woman who's by herself. But leave women alone in public spaces is very broad. And is it saying that men can't speak to women in public spaces anymore? Isn't that the place where they maybe should be speaking? If they're going to try flirt with a girl or something like that, should it not be in public rather than in a quiet alleyway in the dark?
Again, context is
Yeah,
if
that's what it is.
it's those men who kind of just come up to you when you're standing outside Boots waiting for your friend and like, oh, you're right, darling, and kind of stare,
Mm.
what are you doing here? Kind of stare at you a bit weird. Then yeah, just leave women alone. Like, just go
Yeah,
and get help. But if it's, a kind of normal guy seeing somebody that he really wants to talk to, um, then fine. But again, it depends on what conversation they're trying to have with you. It depends if they're being creepy. I think anybody that
yeah,
was conscious of being creepy would probably say, like, I don't mean to be creepy, by the way. I just
yeah.
want to come over and talk to you, maybe at the bar or whatever. And I
Mhm.
hope you don't think that I'm just sitting over there. If you want to come and chat to me, I'll be sitting over there. Leaving it
Yeah.
in the woman's hands and giving her back a little bit of control.
Hmm.
Um, but if it's just a guy, yeah, one of those guys that comes up to you on the street and is kind of just mumbling shit,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think
oh,
I think this goes back to the previous conversation where the
yeah,
first no is enough. That's where it should come into. If you go chat to a girl and she says, I'm not interested, leave it at that, get away. There's nothing wrong with that. You've accepted it, that's fine. And I suppose intention comes into that as well. If your intention is to be horrible or you have bad intentions, then that's maybe where we're coming into. Leave women alone in public spaces if your intentions are bad. If your intentions are just you want to ask the girl out, do so. That should be okay to do as
but
long
make
as
her
you go
feel
about it in the
safe.
correct way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 exactly, exactly.
And the last one I want to speak about is believe women. And again, that's another one with which needs, for in my opinion, it needs context. Believe more women might be better because I think the legal system is very flawed in that not I think it's something like 90% of rape perpetrators do not get punished for it. I think it was that. I may be wrong. I'll find that stat and link it, which means that we're not believing enough women. But I think to make a broad statement like that and say believe all women, I think it should maybe change to take all women seriously, take all accusations seriously. But the horrible thing is that some people lie, not a lot. A very small minority of accusations are lies, but it does happen. And I think we shouldn't accept for someone to go down for something that they didn't do.
Mhm.
There was a rock band called Don Brocco, and a woman accused one of the band members of, I think it was sexual assault. I'll link an article or something like that in the bottom to make sure. And it looked like they were going to get cancelled. in this thing, which should be the case if it was true, but it came out about 2 weeks later that she was lying. It wasn't true at all. And if she hadn't admitted that, that would have been someone innocent going down for something like this. So I think the change is take all women seriously and believe more women might be a better statement.
No, I think with rape accusations, you should kind of take it seriously, like you're saying, or believe women, but also leave maybe that 2%, unless there's unrefutable evidence, leave that 2% or 1% in your head that innocent until proven guilty. But I definitely think that you should take any accusation very seriously.
Yeah.
But then you have to believe it, and to some extent. But I think also, like I said, leave that smidgen of kind of innocent until proven guilty as well.
Yeah.
Because that would technically mean that, say, if the person was lying about their accusation, then that would mean that now we create a society where anybody can accuse anybody of anything. And you could put online such and such said or did this to me, and then everyone just believes it. And it's very dangerous to do that, because then we create a society where you could be accused of something and you can't refute it because everyone would just believe it anyway. But when it comes to rape, I think you need to take the accusations very seriously. And you also have to remember that there's probably a very small minority of women who would lie about that. Or men. Rape happens to men as well. But I think we have to, there's a very small minority. And again, we have to be careful not to, even us talking right now, not to generalize and say that kind of most of the accusations are false or could be false, because you would like to also think, if someone was making that accusation, that they've been through hell and back and that they need help for that, to seek justice. And you don't want to think that people would actually lie about that.
Yeah, I think the thing to reiterate is that it is a very, very small minority of accusations will be lies or just like essentialized. And I think some people would maybe reply saying, well, it is a very small number of accusations. So why can't we just believe all women? I think it's because it's the consequence of that is if we do believe anyone who makes an accusation, then the consequence of that is innocent people go down. That is the consequence, I think. And I do believe we should believe way more women than we believe right now, because the whole system is so corrupt when it comes to these cases. I think it also comes down to, for this to general public, is look at these cases rationally. I think if you have a case where one woman's made an accusation, take it seriously, but what am I trying to say? That doesn't mean that it definitely did happen. But if you have cases where it's 5 different women say something about the same guy, you can rationally say it's probably true.
It's a case by case basis, because Alex Salmond was accused by, was it 9 women? And he was found non-guilty by, what was it, like almost an all-female jury.
Yeah, I think the thing with that one is, either correct me if wrong or I'll put an article on this. I'm sure the verdict was he didn't commit a crime, but that's not to say that there wasn't inappropriate behavior.
But this is what I'm saying, it's a fine line between what is inappropriate in society and what is not. And like I was trying to say to you earlier, there's instances as a woman where you'll go through things that don't feel right, or you'll be put in situations which are a little bit wrong, but then you won't speak up because, 1, legal costs are expensive, and 2, if it's not a crime, then really what's the point? What are you going to achieve by complaining about, that's how you feel. You kind of feel like, what's the point? Say if somebody kind of touched my leg a little bit, and it made me feel uncomfortable. But if I'm not going to be believed, and if I'm going to have to spend £10,000 on a legal representation, and I'm going to cause all this, like I said earlier, furore, then you stay silent as a woman. And like I said, I've been in those situations myself, so I know how you feel, and we should be able to speak up, and we should be able to get that representation, and we should have people prosecuted, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Especially when you know the perpetrator, or you're in the same friend group as the perpetrator, or it's even a work colleague. It can be very difficult, I think, to be put in that situation. So that's what I'm saying. I know you're saying, well, if 3 people are, you could presume, but then can we presume? Can't.
Yeah, I think it may be just.
There's a lot of questions. It's very. There's no right or wrong answer. Well, there's no right or wrong answer to that. I don't think. I think. It comes down to men should not be raping or sexually assaulting women, and that's the bottom line. But obviously, like we're saying with social media, there needs to be more context and education around what is kind of legally inappropriate, or what is in society inappropriate and what isn't. It's hard to, it's hard. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to kind of let women down either. It's just, as a woman, I'd go back and forth about this in my own head sometimes. And like I said, I've been in those situations, so I sympathise with anyone that has. And I'm just telling it how it is. Like, I know what it's like. I'm not saying that's right. And I'm not saying that, we should be silenced. I'm just saying that it happens.
Yeah, I think the solution to these issues is what we're doing now, is having the conversation. It could be that some of the things we've talked about were wrong, or we might go back on ourselves and think, well, maybe the other side was right on that one, and that's fine. That should be fine. I think the way we should be talking about these issues is we shouldn't be married to our opinions. We should be willing to say, I was wrong about that, and not be scared of being called out, because this is a very sensitive topic, and especially I think it's a tricky subject for a man to have, I think, and a woman as well. I just think that since the majority of the conversation has been aimed at men, I think men need to be able to have the conversation and be part of the conversation. I think that in general is a solution. Whether we have specific solutions, that's a harder thing to solve, but the conversations maybe to start.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's been discussed in the past few weeks, and in defense of that post, people aren't always going to get it right. It's if people are willing to learn from that behavior, or learn, to listen. If they listen to other people as well, it's the people who write these posts and are also unwilling to listen to another point of view that I think can sometimes be quite, not dangerous, but do you know what I mean? It can be a dangerous territory to go down. But I think at the same time, there's always scope to learn, and I think the conversation is the way that we begin that learning process, and hopefully a healing process as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably a positive place to end, because it's been a dark subject, but at least we've ended on something optimistic.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry about my setup. As I was saying to you earlier, my flatmate needed to make lunch, so I had to come and sit in my room, but it was cozy nonetheless.
I think people understand.
Yeah, I know, working from home, but thank you so much for having me as well. It was
Thanks for coming back on.
an interesting topic.